Afternoon, everyone. Great to be here. Thank you very much. Okay, my role in the department currently is managing a drought and climate adaptation program, and we've got a couple of projects which are relevant, I think, to the sugar industry. And I've got a history, I guess, in climate risk extension, running a lot of climate risk workshops across the state, particularly in the sugar industry. I'm locally born and bred, I guess, and run this new program from here. But over the last 25 years, I've been involved in this space, I guess, running workshops with Roger Stone, etc., and over the years. So very, very engaged and I guess keen to see this material used and be useful for producers at the end of the day. So, just in terms of where we're heading, I wanted to acknowledge right up front that the environment that you manage, the businesses you're in are very risky. You've got to manage all your production risk, your financial risk, your successional issues, negotiate stuff with your financiers, etc. And climate risk is just another part of all that, I suppose, that you've got to manage from time to time. The fact that you are still in business in this day and age means you're doing something very well, and you're managing our extremely variable climate here very well to start with. So that's important to acknowledge. And so climate risk, as I said, is just another little bit, and I'm hoping I can add some value to support that a little bit better over the next hour. I'm going to focus, I guess, on two things mainly, this climate risk management area and a particular project that our program's funding at the moment that's working in the sugar industry. And I'm also going to mention this risk transfer. So there are, I guess, climate risks that you can't manage easily, and there's an opportunity in one of the projects that we're working in to insure against those risks. So transfer your risks so someone else has to pay for them. It's an insurance, a novel insurance opportunity, and it might suit your business to be able to do that. I'm going to talk about user decision making too. We've run many workshops over the years with the sugar industry, and they've noted where lots of different decisions are relevant in this space, I suppose, to make better decisions. I'm going to talk about briefly climate variability and the big picture, and just give you an indication of how variable the climate is that you have to operate in. I'm going to talk about climate forecasting now, so what can you access right now, and climate forecasting soon. So in this project we're talking about, that I'm going to be talking about, there's on the horizon there's some really interesting products I think that you might be interested in. And talk a little bit about forecast accuracy and usefulness too, because everyone wants to know, I guess, how accurate these things are and can they be useful. And then finish basically with the climate risk transfer, the insurance option, and just mention, my last slide is about opportunities and challenges. So I'm going to challenge you to think about what you can do to incorporate this information potentially, but also recognise and acknowledge the challenges too in doing this. Has anyone been to a climate risk workshop? Can you put your hand up if you've been to a climate risk workshop? Not many of you at all. There weren't many in the other room either. So I won't assume anything then if that's the case. Okay, so when we've run these workshops with growers in the past, in the last 10 years in particular, there are many, many different farm management decisions that are relevant using a climate forecast. Nutrient management, chemical application, irrigation, harvesting, planting, crop diversification options, and these are examples that producers farmers have given us that they think are relevant and where a forecast is useful. Business management, marketing, your investment choice, labour management issues, infrastructure management, so machinery purchases, logistics and maintenance planning, also relevant probably to millers, and recreation. Who likes to go fishing? There'll be more than one who puts their hand up for that, surely. A few, not as many. So holiday planning and fishing might be relevant too, maybe. So what about this how variable our climate is? In case you don't know, if you stacked up our climate against other countries around the world, we have some of the most variable climate compared to anywhere else, but particularly our key trading partners. So India, China, USA, etc., those key competitors and other nations have relatively less climate variability to deal with than we do. And just an example of that, this little map here of Australia shows the areas which are very dark, like red or orange, show where rainfall is very variable, highly variable. And you can see from that little map that northeast Queensland has this focus, and the sugar growing areas in particular have this focus of where rainfall is very variable. And that's an issue that you have to contend with. And as I said, you're managing that season to season, day to day. People often talk about the cycles of wet and dry that they experience, and we had a gentleman in the last room who said that he looked at this map, or this poster, which is wet and dry cycles going back to pre-Federation, the Federation drought, and he could pick out a 17 to 30 year cycle roughly if he stacked up all of those dates, and there might be a longer cycle there as well. On this particular poster, I have two posters in the other room if you want to get them. One's this wet dry one, and the other one is Australia's annual rainfall with cyclones on it. So if you're interested in those posters, please take them. The poster, the wet dry poster, also has the SOI, so signal associated with it, so you can see what was the SOI doing when during these wet and dry periods. And also there's another one, the interdecadal Pacific oscillation, which is a 10-year cycle. So it's on the map as well, so you can actually have a look at that information as well. So I encourage you to take those if you're interested. But yeah, there are cycles, and largely they're driven by the climate drivers that are impacting on our part of the world. And part of when we've run these climate workshops in the past, it's been about supporting people in their understanding of those climate drivers and how they can use forecasts associated with some of these drivers. So there's heaps of different drivers impacting on Australian rainfall, and particularly in our part of the world in northeastern Australia. I'm local, I live just south of Sarina and run a few cows, and I was born and bred up here around Farley. Our part of the world is usually impacted by this El Nino, La Nina cycle out in the Pacific Ocean. And it tends to oscillate over time, and this wet dry cycle poster reflects the oscillations largely of that system that happens in the Pacific. And actually this cycle in the Pacific drives a lot of global weather, not just weather in our part of the world, but it's a very significant driver. And ironically, I suppose, that gives us some capacity to forecast, because if you're in one of these sorts of patterns, an El Nino pattern, which is normally, is it wet or dry? The El Nino, dry, and wet's the La Nina. If you're in either of those, it actually gives you more capacity to forecast more accurately if you're in either of those patterns. So what's it look like in terms of rainfall associated with an El Nino or La Nina? And you can see that the top map there shows El Nino years rainfall, so it's in red and pretty angry, and you've got a 0 to 20% chance of getting above the median or averagey sort of rainfall. But contrast that with the blue map down the bottom, which is the La Nina years, where you get 70 to 90% chance of getting above averagey sort of rainfall. And if you remember back to 2010-11, that was the last really big La Nina event we had, and really wet conditions, and I think the sugar industry lost a lot of money in that period by forward selling a lot of sugar. So there's an example, and strangely enough, well, not so strangely, back in the April of that year before that disastrous season, we had a really strong forecast that the spring, the harvesting season was going to be pretty wet. So some pretty challenging decisions were made in that time that really affected the sugar industry. Okay, so in the other room I had a whiteboard, and I asked people what their favourite weather sites, information, climate sites, apps, etc. were. So can you just shout out a few? Sorry?
Wally's Weather.
Wally's Weather. Who's Wally?
Townsville Forecaster.
Where's, okay, right, like Nitzo. There's Nitzo, he's got that Oz Cyclone Chasers. Yeah. Different, yeah, right. The bomb site, thank you. Yeah, the bomb site. Elders weather, okay, thank you. So, David Freeburn, I'm not sure if he's in the room, he mentioned Climate, he is. Anyone uses Climate?
Why not?
Yes, why not? And I think there was only one in the other room too, David, and I said that was a shame, so it's worth having a look at, I think. So, yeah, download that when you get a chance. So, there's a range of different sites. Personally, I think the Bureau is a good one, although it's a horrendous site to navigate. Personally, that's what I think. But I think that they've actually announced that they're going to revamp their website. So look forward, hopefully, to a better experience when you're navigating to where you want to go. So, future of climate forecasting. There's a lot of improvements happening and have happened in only the last 2 years or so to global forecasting systems. They are, I think, getting better. I think you'd acknowledge that the short-term weather, the Weather Bureau's forecast of weather in the next week has improved a little bit. I mean, it's always horrendously difficult and challenging to say how much rain exactly is going to be, but I think they're doing a better job of saying when there is going to be rain. They're not perfect, but I think they have improved over the years. So there's a lot of, but in the climate space, there's a lot of investment going into to improve climate forecasting systems and models. There's supercomputers now that we've got more access to crunch the numbers which you need to produce useful information. Fine-tuning where skill exists across the country and at what time of year. There's opportunity to do that a little more, I think. And most importantly, we want to try and customise forecasts for your needs. If they're not useful to people who are making decisions, then in a sense we're wasting our time. So we're quite very focused and engaged, I suppose, in trying to make, or I am anyway, on trying to make those forecasts relevant for your needs where we can. Okay, this is just an animation of how a climate model tries to simulate the weather, I suppose, and this is the blue areas on this animation are for rainfall, and shortly there might be this is 2009-10, there's a cyclone I think comes in on the Queensland coast, and yeah, but I guess to summarise, these models do a fantastic and tremendous job of getting a whole lot of information together from the atmosphere, from the oceans at depth, a whole range of different measurements, and punching it through very complex sort of physics and coming up with a result at the end. So someone mentioned models this morning. I think David had an interesting picture of a model in his presentation, which I thought looked like a cuckoo clock. But it was these models I do think have their place and their use, and in terms of the output they produce. Okay, so the output from these forecast models is around producing, I guess, a range of outcomes. They just don't make one output. They produce 100 outputs. They start off bringing all the information together and then produce 100 runs of that and produce an output associated with 100 runs. And then if out of those 100 runs, 80% say that it's going to be above average rainfall, then there's an 80% chance that there will be above average rainfall in relation to that model output. So that's how those probabilities are worked out. So contrasting to the 80%, there's also that 20% risk that obviously the lower, or you'll be below average rainfall in that model output. So it's not a perfect sort of explanation or output in terms of how much you're going to get, but it's an indication that the odds will shift. And that's the way you use this information. It's about probabilities. It's about your attitude to risk. When you look at a forecast and when I look at a forecast or an outlook, my interpretation of that will be based on my needs and my attitude to risk, and could be quite different from yours. And it's about the shift of the odds and probabilities over time and what you're comfortable in terms of, and the comfort you have in using this information. So just to indicate that maybe these models are getting a little bit better, this is a slide that shows the old Bureau of Met model, which is called Poema 2, and the current Access model, which is the state-of-the-art, I guess, version, which they're always continuing to improve, incidentally. They just don't leave it static. They're improving it all the time. But the resolution of the Poema 2 model was very, very coarse. So each of those squares is about 250 kilometres, whereas in Access it's 60 kilometres. So the resolution there is much better. You'd hope that it does a better job of modelling what's going to happen. And in fact, if you compare the two, poor old Tasmania didn't get a Guernsey under Poema in terms of being able to model anything, but under this one, it actually comes up with the Tasmanian Plateau, and we've got the Great Dividing Range, and it does a better job of on the coast as well. Not perfect, obviously, but it does a better job. And how does that then translate into comparing that to what actually happened in terms of observations? Well, this is an example for the December, January, February season, and the observations are on the left-hand map, and the old model output are on the right-hand side to that, and in the middle is a new model. So it seems to be doing a good job, at least for that summer season, of modelling what was happening in northern Australia. The east perhaps didn't do so well in the centre and south and the southwest, but seems to be doing a better job than it did for the old model, at least, anyway. Someone mentioned the Bureau as a regular source of information. I think there's been a step change, almost a revolution in what the Bureau are now putting onto their website. Before, you could, if you went into the climate area, not the weather area, the climate area, you had next month, month 1, month 2, month 3, I think, and then season 1. So all you had to guide you was that limited period. Now, they've actually got multi-week forecasts. So they're trying to plug that gap between the weather forecast, what's known in the next week, and weeks going out beyond that. So week 1, 2, week 2 and 3 even, and they're even going out 4 months now. So they're giving you an extra look at a season, a bit of a heads up. You know, whether you'd make a massive decision around that, that's up to your risk appetite and those sorts of things, but it's giving you a bit of a guide of what they're talking about and what they might expect to happen. And not only that, you can actually, if you know how to, and this is again, it's because it's a difficult site to navigate, if you are able to, you know how to do it, you can actually navigate to your particular location. So if you click on, I haven't got a pointer here, but if you clicked on the top left-hand corner of the map image, there's a magnifying glass. You click on that and you can drill down to enter your address, your town, and you can find out what the probability of getting a certain amount of rainfall is for the period you've chosen. So this is better, in my view, than looking at just the median or averagey, or chance of exceeding the median or averagey rainfall. It actually gives you the chance to say, what's the chance of getting 50 mil? What's relevant for my situation, 100 mil? What are the chances of getting that? And you can drill down to your location and get that. And I think that can be useful. I thought I'd play a quick video, hopefully, if this works.
Climate affects us all, so having a good idea of what the climate may be like over the coming months can help us plan ahead. This is where the Bureau of Meteorology's climate outlooks are such a valuable tool. Knowing how to interpret them is the key. While a weather forecast can tell you that tomorrow may be 18 degrees and cloudy, the climate outlook can't be this specific because it is looking so much further ahead. What they can do is tell us the odds of something occurring. For example, last summer, the outlook said the odds of wetter than average conditions for southeast Queensland were 35%. This also meant that there was a 65% chance of it being drier than average. And while it was indeed dry, there was no absolute guarantee it would come out that way. It's a bit like stacking a roulette wheel with more red or black. You're not guaranteed to win because there is always that element of chance. But you know that in the long run, having the odds in your favour will mean you'll come out ahead. There are many examples of using the odds to inform decisions. A farmer may choose to change crops based upon how strongly the outlook favours dry conditions. A retailer may decide to bring in the spring clothing lines a few weeks earlier if warmer than average temperatures are likely. and emergency services may choose to change their fire management plans depending on the likelihood of a hot, dry summer. The accuracy of the outlook varies during the year and from location to location, so it's worth looking at our accuracy maps whenever you use a climate outlook. Let's say you're interested in the maximum temperature outlook for November to January. If you are in the Gold Coast area, the outlook suggests a high chance of exceeding the average temperature for this period. Looking at the historical accuracy map, you learn that at this time of year, the model has performed well in southeast Queensland with up to 75% accuracy. In contrast, outlooks for parts of the Northern Territory have had limited success. Just remember, these maps show the average accuracy over a 30-year period. During strong climate events such as El Nino or La Nina, we may actually have a higher degree of confidence in the outlooks. Check out the Climate Influences section to get our climatologist's view on what's driving our climate. Planning ahead with climate outlooks can help you make smarter choices and stack the odds in your favour. For the Bureau of Meteorology, I'm Andrew Watkins.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, I think that's a useful sort of summary to me of the potential value of use of these forecasts and not betting your whole farm on it, but thinking about your own attitude to risk and what an outlook is telling you in terms of moving forward. I wanted to move on now to this opportunity, I think, that for you to engage in a project that's working in the sugar industry. We've got a reference group in the sugar industry that provides feedback to us about what's happening in this project, and it's got a very distinct user focus. So from the very start of this project, we got information from this reference group about which stations to develop forecasts around so that we were covering the sugar industry well enough, and we've had feedback about which decisions are relevant, etc., and we're trying to incorporate those in. And also, as forecast products are developed, how good are they? What's the value of them? How do we use them? Are they presented in the right format? Can we understand them? So that's an important part of this project, which is a significant national project, and we're just a small part of it in Queensland. SRA are involved in it as well, so your funding R&D body, and DAF and University of Southern Queensland are also involved in this, and we're working in the grazing sector in this project as well. So the only industry that aren't represented are horticulture. Every other major industry in Australia is involved in this, so significant project nationally, I believe. And to date, the project has been producing forecasts around heat extremes and etc., and more temperature-related things relevant for dairy and other crops, and also on cold extremes. And now, for the remaining couple of years in the project, they're focusing more on rainfall extremes. And so we have got some information on rainfall extremes, for example, related to the North Queensland floods last year. But a greater focus now is on producing products that are relevant for rainfall, related to rainfall extremes. So again, this is getting away from, I guess, averagey, above average sort of rainfall or median rainfall. It's trying to predict or forecast and have outlooks for the ends of the extreme ends, I suppose, of what you might experience in either temperature or rainfall, etc. And they're producing a whole range of products, which I'm going to give a couple of examples of. So mapping-based products. These things are pie charts, which show the chance of being, a greater chance potentially of being in an upper third, lower third, or no chance if there's no skill or no particular movement in any direction. Also, not just the thirds, but the 20%. So cutting the top 20% of rainfall, or lowest 20% of rainfall. What's the chance of being there? So the very extremes at either end. Is there an increased risk of being in either of those parts of the distribution for the outlook? And is that even important for you to know that? In some cases it might be, other cases not. And also a range of different products, but this is just one example. So this tries to bring in a range of things, both temperature, minimum and max, daily rainfall out 30 days, etc. So, and associated with all of these, importantly, is having a crack at, well, is information of any, is it skillful? Is it accurate? Is it useful for me to use at this time of year? So you'll be able to check on that, as you can with the bureau, those little bureau examples of outlooks. You can go and check whether they're the same product, the little green maps, to see whether there's any accuracy for your location for the particular time you're using it. So this is an example of the week one, and again it's multi-week out to month and season again, as those other ones on the current bureau side are. So this is an example of week one, and it's starting in the top right-hand corner from the 20th of the 2nd, so a couple of days ago, looking at rainfall probabilities. And in this case, it's splitting it up into 3, so it's like a pie chart map in a sense. And if you're in the green area, the very dark green area, there's a high chance you're in the top part of that extreme end of the rainfall distribution. It might not be extreme, but at least above averagey, I suppose. And you can see for the week, this is for the week, the 20th of the 2nd to the 26th of the 2nd, so we're in that period now, and you can see that for our part of the world here, and most of the sugar growing areas, there's an increased risk of being wetter. So in that wetter third of the distribution of rainfall. And Western Australia is a bit similar, and in the middle of Australia, there's an increased chance of being drier, in that drier third of the distribution. So that's week one. Week two is washes out a bit there. For parts of for our part of the world, there might be a slightly increased chance. But if I go back to, I'll just go back to week one, and you can see that for that week one, there's almost a 70 to 80% chance, perhaps, maybe even a bit higher, 80 to 100% chance of being in that wetter third. So that's about twice, almost 3 times the chance of being in that normally. So the very high chance that you'll be in that wetter part of the distribution for week one. Again, at week one, it's just straight in front of us, so you could argue it's easier to forecast. Week two, as I said, washes out a bit, but still for parts of it, there's an increased chance of being in the upper third, and also for inland from, might be Ingham, is a reduced chance of being in that upper third. So with that knowledge, you might choose for week two to do something different on your farm. We can also produce this for stations, so we can produce a pie chart for a station. So this is just an example that explains the different, a pie chart sort of rainfall distribution, and if there's an equal chance of being in either part of that pie, then there's a 33% chance of being either dry, wetter or near median. But the forecast, just as an example, in this example, it's a 57% chance of being in the upper third. So it's like that map, but it's actually drilling down to station information. And with that sort of outlook, depending on the time, this is for winter season, so probably not relevant so much in Northern Australia, but for a particular time of year, if you knew that was the outlook, it was going to be a chance of being wetter than average, you might do something different on your place as a result of that outlook. So just going to one now, I actually live south of Sarina. I've got a few cows down there, so I was looking at to try and compare with what I was getting, and this is a product which actually has all of the different forecast periods on it. And I know it's a bit horrendous to look at, but it's the way that these are portrayed now. When they're portrayed for you, when products are made operational, they'll be made more easy to digest and look at and filter through. But for Sarina at least, week two has that 57% chance of being in wetter distribution, and week 1 and 2 does as well. Week 3 might be a chance of being a bit drier, etc. So I've only masked the bottom half of that out because it's a pretty difficult diagram to interpret all at once. The bottom half of that same page has the month 1 through to season 2, and you can see that for this example there's no shift in the probabilities. They're close enough to almost all of them being a third. So at the moment there's not much. I wouldn't look at that with any particular relevance. It's an equal chance of being in any three of those parts of the rainfall distribution. But I'll be updating myself further on throughout the year to see if those probabilities change over time. So they're pie charts. This is one for air. Who's from air in the room? Anyone from air? A few people from air. This is one from air going back to 31st of October. I thought it might be useful to think about other people's situation and just reflect on. I think you guys had a pretty dry period there from November, December, maybe into January, and this is what, based on the 31st of October, that's when this model was run from, this is what you're looking at in terms of week 2, 3, etc., and they're all showing fairly, apart from December, January, February, perhaps, they're all, and month 3, January, they're all showing a fairly dry, apart from week 1 and 2, they're all showing a fairly dry outlook. So increased chance of being in that below average. So I'm not sure what rain you got in air, but maybe you got, it'd be interesting to know whether you got, that fit the bill in a sense. And what you would have done, more importantly, what you could have done differently with that information. If anything, you mightn't have been able to do anything. Okay, just looking at temperature for a few other options. This is air research stations. So for most of these pie charts, it's showing an increased chance of being in the top, the hotter part of that temperature distribution. So the red quarter of these the red third of these pie charts, in most cases, is fairly high or higher than the other two. So an increased chance. You can still fall into those other smaller parts of the distribution, but there's a higher chance you'll be in those higher max temperature parts of the distribution. For Ingham, pick me up if I'm not flicking through. Is that Ingham? Yeah, that's Ingham. So similar story for Ingham. And I just threw this one in for Gayndah. I don't know if there are any people from Childers. I'm not sure if Catalyst goes down to Childers, but they're trying to expand a bit, I think, into the South Burnett, chasing water, but frost might be an issue there. So this is minimum temperature, looking forward over the next few months a bit, and might be relevant in terms of planting cane, etc. If doesn't look as though it's going to be too cool, so you mightn't meet those thresholds related to planting cane, which needs a little bit warmer, I think, than what you might get in winter in those parts of the world anyway. So they're the pie charts, so they may or may not be useful to you to think about, but we're working with those. We've also as I said before, trying to look at the top 20% and bottom 20% as well, so we can do that. We can look at what are the chances of being for rainfall or temperature falling in the bottom 20% or top 20% or whatever. So similar to the pie charts, but just a different split of the rain gauge, if you like, from very low to the very high. And an example for Proserpine, if you're in Proserpine, this was from the 16th of February. It's when I started this run on the 16th of February, and it shows from the 23rd to the 29th for week 2, an increased chance of being in that top 20%. So 1.5 times perhaps the risk of being in that top 20%. So, and I mean, a way to interpret that might be just to look at all of that distribution across there and say, well, there's still a chance it might be a bit dry, but just it's a reduced chance. Yeah, so there's a bit of guidance there for that particular time. Other times of the when you look at these forecasts, there'll be no guidance, there'll be no skill, there'll be just, for season 2 there, for example, bottom right-hand side, there's not much difference between any of those. Another one for max temperature, this is for Mareeba. So this stands out a little here, that the next few weeks and months max temperature could be in the top 20%. So that might have an impact on irrigation and the way you think about how you deploy irrigation and what you might do up there if it's going to be extremely warm up there. And the last one I'm going to show you, there are other products as well. The last one I'm going to show you is this one. This is just an example for Sarina, which tries to put multiple bits of information together: max temp, min temp, daily rainfall. So this is each of those plots is for a day. As you go left to right for temperature and rainfall, and this is back on the 16th so last week, and showing that there's chances of a bit of a blip happening, a wet blip on the 22nd, 23rd, where we are now, showing that there's an increased, I guess, chance of that. Doesn't come up with the actual values there as much, but an increased chance of potentially being a rainfall event happening through that period. And I did mention accuracy before, so for all of these products and the Bureau products that are live at the moment, you can access these sorts of accuracy products, and anywhere where there's colour here, and deep green colour means there's pretty good accuracy and reasonable skill. But for parts of the year, if you look at May, June, July, for example, just about all the sugar industry is white there, indicating there's no skill. So you wouldn't use this particular product, which is season 1, decile 1 and 2 rainfall, so that's very low rainfall. If you're looking at that, then you wouldn't consider, you probably wouldn't consider using that product at that particular time of year. But for other parts of the year, the skill and accuracy looks fairly good. So where can you access these? Well, this is an experimental website at the moment, and if you're really interested in this and you want to access some of these and have a look at them, then I'm happy to talk to you about that. It's a password protected website, and you have to understand that they're all research products, but I'm really keen to get people's feedback on these products and feed that back, more importantly, feed that feedback back to the Bureau and others who have the decision-making responsibility around this project and what products go forward. So this is a website. It's not easy to navigate. I'll state that up front, but I can sit down with you and we can go through some things and you can provide feedback if you want to do that. So there's a product suite on the left-hand side, forecast date, start date, etc., and the other things to get stations, to look at stations in particular, and look at different output options. So that's the site we're using at the moment. Okay. So just some cautionary notes, I suppose, about this project. It is, as I said, research in progress, and the products are for feedback purposes. They're not supposed to appear in the media, and the product set can change, and each day isn't available all the time because they're working on the website. And it's a research tool that we can show to people to give some feedback, obviously. And the final product isn't going to look like any of those. It's going to look like something, we hope that it will look like something that the average person, I'll include myself in that, the average person can look at, understand and incorporate into their decision-making processes easily. So being able to, was it someone mentioned Wally's weather or whatever, if there are good interfaces out there, then connecting with, and climate maybe is a potential one too. So that's what we'll be trying to do. Okay, now, is there any questions about that part before I move on to this risk transfer stuff? Has anyone got any questions they'd like to ask? If you haven't, that's fine, I'll move on. But if you've got any questions for me about that, I can deal with them now. It's okay, I'll keep on going. There'll be room for questions at the end if you've got some. Okay, so looking at this risk transfer options, we've got a project that we're funding in this program that is looking at and researching different insurance opportunities, so different to the ones that you might be familiar with and perhaps relevant to your situation. They're trying to I guess, insure against those risks that you can't manage. So your climate risk management can maybe only go so far, and these are trying to address and provide options for insuring against other things, cyclones, bushfires, drought, flooding events, etc., which might be relevant and might impact on you. So if we take cyclone as an example, then the or rainfall or temperature, you can create an index around where that might actually impact on you, and when you might need some assistance or a policy payment to come through and actually fund you in response to that. The difference between this sort of insurance and other insurance is that the claim amount is based on some sort of pre-agreed scale of payment. So, and you can actually choose the amount of premium that you want to pay to get a certain payout. So you could choose a $10,000 payout, $50,000, $100,000. There'd be a limit depending on the process, but it's very flexible in that sense. So it lends itself to you thinking about what your attitude to risk is. With the cyclone example, there'd be a zone associated with that, and if you're in that zone and the cyclone moves through it, then you would be paid. The event would be defined, so it might be, in the work they've done, it's a Category 3 cyclone or above, and if you're in that area, then it'd be, the policy would be triggered and you'd be paid. The interesting thing is that there's no assessment process. You're paid within 14 days. Even if you had no damage or impact from the cyclone, but you fell within that area, you'd still be paid out. So it's quite a different way to think about it. No assessment, quick payout, blah blah blah. So that's and there, you can actually use this approach to do very creative things, like if there's a policy that these guys are thinking about in relation to electricity charges, which might be relevant to irrigators in the Burdekin, etc. So they've been working in Bundaberg around that as well. So there's a whole range of things that you can look at this. The benefits, I think, of this approach are a few of them anyway. It's that the program, if it's developed, reflects the geography and the risk exposure and risk appetite that you have as an individual. And they've actually developed a little program which you can go in and actually develop, have a look at what premium might suit you. It's not publicly available yet, but it will be soon. It's a little calculator tool. There's no exclusions or confusion about the coverage. You know exactly what you're paying, exactly what you'll get. As I said, the claims are settled within 14 days following the trigger of the policy occurring, and there's no restriction on the use of claims payments either. Now, just as an example, and this might frighten you, I'm not sure, but the premiums are about 4 to 6% of the payout. So if you had a $50,000 payout, then you'd pay a $3,000 odd premium, $6,000 premium for a $100,000 payout. And because that's expensive, we know it's expensive, we've been working with cane growers to maybe develop a mutual fund approach, which is different and could make the premium cheaper for producers and farmers who want to take this option up. In that way, it will make this more affordable for you at the end of the day. So these funds, they're commercially proven, I guess, for common interest groups, and you have a common interest group with cane growers. And risks are shared on a collective basis for the good of all the members. They're owned by the industry entity. In this case, I guess it'd be cane growers, but it's managed by an independent manager. And members contribute the premium to the fund, and then insurance is arranged to limit the exposure of the fund, etc. And payments are made to members who suffer the losses, and in low claims years, the profits are returned to the fund. So it's managed as a fund, and the whole idea of it is that it makes it more affordable for you to be able to transfer your risk for those extreme events if that's relevant for you. So just my second last slide. Challenges and opportunities. I think it's a continual challenge to dealing with uncertainty and for forecasts in particular, and understanding probabilities in forecasts. That's not necessarily easy to do. It's a challenge. Knowing how and where to apply forecasts in your complex management environment, I think is a challenge. And when we've run meetings and workshops in the past, I always worry about people taking an outlook today that we've provided today and then making a decision 2 months down the track based on an outlook without actually updating themselves. So you really need to keep yourself informed and update yourself with the current climate outlook on a more continual basis. And with apps, we're trying to produce this sort of product in apps, I think will make, hopefully it might be as easy as looking up a radar. So when you're going out spraying or something, you can look at radar or whatever you do and pretty easily find out what the outlooks are. So it's easy for you is what I'm getting at. But, you know, opportunities I think are considerable. You can, these novel insurance options might be relevant, might not be. But with the forecast information, I reckon there's real potential to make better informed decision making with focused and customised forecasts. Not putting the farm on it, but just moving your management a bit and improving your odds around certain management decisions. And we mentioned lots of management decisions earlier on where this stuff could be applied, provided by farmers who mentioned them. And my selfish, I guess, plea at the end of this presentation is if you want to provide some feedback to BOM and influence the agenda there and how these products are delivered at the end of the day, then an opportunity exists, and I'm happy to work with you about how those products could be customised to be useful for you. Thanks very much for your attention, and I appreciate your time.